Midnight in Ouagadougou. The capital of Burkina Faso slept under a heavy sky. Families rested in their homes. Children dreamed without knowing that within minutes, their entire nation could have been torn apart. At 11:47 p.m. on September 3, 2025, 73 armed men, an alliance of rogue soldiers, foreign mercenaries, and sleeper agents, moved into position. Their mission was brutal but simple. Eliminate Captain Ibrahim Traoré, dismantle his government, and install a puppet regime loyal to Western powers. They called it Operation Golden Reset, a $300 million coup conspiracy designed not just to change a leader, but to destroy a dream, the dream of an Africa that belongs to Africans. The world's media didn't report what really happened that night. They were busy with headlines about elections, markets, and celebrity scandals. But inside Burkina Faso, intelligence officers had already uncovered fragments of the plot. Coded messages, strange bank transfers, and whispers in dark alleys all pointed to something larger than anyone had dared to imagine. This was not politics as usual. This was the shadow war for Africa's future. And at the center stood a man the West calls Africa's most dangerous leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Dangerous, not because he steals, not because he bows to foreign powers, but because he refuses to. Dangerous, because he believes Africa must rise on its own feet, free from the chains of old empires and new corporations. Tonight, you will hear the untold story of that coup attempt, the midnight operation, the foreign money trail, the betrayal of generals, the courage of ordinary soldiers, and the counter-strike that changed history. Stay with us, because once you know the truth about September 3, 2025, you will never look at Africa, or the West, the same way again. If you believe a nation's destiny should be written by its own people, not by foreign hands, then listen closely. This is not just Burkina Faso's story. This is Africa's story. This is our story. The clock ticked toward midnight. September 3, 2025 would be remembered as the night Africa came face to face with its most dangerous conspiracy in modern history. At 11:47 p.m., heavily armed men spread across Ouagadougou. The operation was divided into 4 precise phases. Phase 1, midnight to 1:00 a.m. Strike teams prepared to hit the presidential compound, seize the national television station, and disable major communication centers. By controlling the airwaves, the conspirators could announce a new government before most citizens even realized what was happening. Phase 2, 1:00 to 3:00 a.m. Mass arrests were planned. Ministers, military commanders loyal to Captain Traoré, and even civil society leaders were marked for capture. Within hours, anyone who could resist the coup would be silenced. Phase 3, 3:00 to 6:00 a.m. A so-called Council of National Salvation would be installed, led by General Yakuba Ouedraogo, a man secretly recruited years earlier during training in the United States. His first orders? Suspend all Russian and Chinese agreements, restore French mining concessions, and reopen the doors to Western corporations. Phase 4, 6:00 a.m. to noon. With a puppet regime in place, foreign embassies in West Africa were expected to quickly recognize the new government. Contracts worth billions in gold, oil, and uranium would be signed before noon. This was not a desperate rebellion. It was a machine. 18 months of planning, hundreds of meetings, and $300 million carefully funneled through Swiss banks, British charities, and American development programs. Financial records later revealed just how deep the corruption ran. Senior generals received $2.3 million each. Colonels and majors were paid between $150,000 and $800,000. Even low-ranking soldiers were bought off with $1,000 to $10,000. One name stood out: General Yakuba Ouedraogo. He had sworn loyalty to Burkina Faso, But the CIA had arranged for his wife's cancer treatment in the United States, his children's tuition at elite schools, and a mansion in Maryland worth $1.8 million. On the night of September the 3rd, his coded message to his foreign handlers was intercepted. "The lion will sleep tonight. The eagle will rise with dawn." But here is the twist the conspirators never expected. Burkina intelligence had been monitoring unusual financial flows for weeks. A mid-level officer offered $25,000 to betray his unit, chose instead to report the bribe. That single act of courage triggered a chain reaction inside Traoré's security circle. By 9:23 p.m., Russian intelligence confirmed the final stage of Operation Golden Reset. At 9:45 p.m., Captain Traoré authorized Operation Thundershield, a counter-coup plan drawn up for moments exactly like this. By 10:17 p.m., Chinese cyber specialists disabled the coup plotters' encrypted networks, cutting them off from their handlers abroad. And so, when the conspirators moved at 11:47 p.m., they were walking into a trap. Special forces loyal to Traoré struck first. Roadblocks sealed the capital. Presidential guards secured the compound with armored vehicles. Within minutes, firefights broke out at key intersections. But this time, the ambush was reversed. By sunrise, 862 conspirators were in custody. That number included 73 rogue officers, 156 civilians, 234 foreign operatives, and 12 generals. Weapons caches were seized, 2,340 rifles, 89 vehicles, and millions in cash and gold. The coup that was supposed to end Burkina Faso's independence had collapsed before it began. But the question remained: who exactly had funded this vast network? And how high did the betrayal reach? Stay with us, because the financial trail would reveal names and nations no one expected. And the betrayal went far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. The morning after the failed coup, Burkina Faso woke up to a storm. Radio stations, newspapers, and community loudspeakers all carried the same breaking news: the $300 million conspiracy has been stopped. But the relief was mixed with rage. For the first time in modern history, the Burkina people were presented with undeniable evidence of foreign powers funding the destruction of their sovereignty. Among those arrested was General Yakuba Ouedraogo, once celebrated as a defender of the nation. His betrayal cut deepest. At his public trial, the courtroom was packed. Elders, students, mothers, soldiers, all watching the man who had secretly sold their future. The prosecutor's voice was cold. "General, financial records show you received $2.3 million from foreign agencies. How do you explain this on a military salary?" Ouedraogo lowered his head. "The accounts were for my wife's cancer treatment." The prosecutor fired back. "The treatment cost $340,000. Where did the other $196 million go? And what about your intercepted calls with CIA handlers?" At that moment, the general broke down. His words shook the courtroom. "I betrayed my oath, my country, my people. I have no excuse." Gasps echoed. Some wept. Others clenched their fists. It was the face of treason laid bare. Even more shocking was the revelation that multinational corporations had directly funded the conspiracy. Documents showed Barrick Gold, Canada, funneled $23 million, promising coup leaders a doubling of production rights. Newmont Mining, USA, sent $18 million through aid organizations, coordinating with Pentagon advisors. Endeavour Mining, UK, delivered $15 million via London banks, bribing chiefs in gold-rich regions. The evidence was irrefutable. Africa's wealth was not just being stolen, it was being weaponized against its own people. When the trials were broadcast live, streets across Ouagadougou exploded with emotion. University students marched with signs reading, "No more puppets." Women's associations delivered food to loyalist soldiers, thanking them for protecting the nation. Farmers left their fields to gather in public squares, chanting, "Africa for Africans." The wave spread beyond Burkina Faso. In Nigeria, 3.4 million protesters demanded investigations into Western influence. In Kenya, 2.8 million rallied for what they called African Nuremberg trials. In South Africa, over 4 million people marched, carrying banners, "Prosecute the collaborators." Social media exploded. Hashtags like African Justice and No More Puppets hit billions of impressions. Young Africans mocked Western news outlets, remixing their coverage into viral protest songs. Meanwhile, Captain Ibrahim Traoré appeared on national television. He stood in plain uniform, no theatrics, just a man addressing his people. His voice was steady, his message unmistakable. They offered to sell our land, our gold, our honor, and they expected us to bow. But we will never kneel. Burkina Faso is not for sale. Africa is not for sale. The broadcast ended with a challenge that echoed far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. If you touch this nation, you touch all of Africa. It was not just a declaration. It was the birth of a doctrine. Mali, Niger, and Guinea quickly pledged military and political support, warning foreign powers that any further attempt at destabilization would face a united response. But as the continent celebrated, silence fell in Washington, Paris, and London. Behind closed doors, powerful men and women asked themselves the same question. If Burkina Faso can resist us and survive, what happens when the rest of Africa follows? Stay with us, because the consequences of this failed coup would shake not just West Africa, but the entire global order. The failed coup did not end with arrests and trials. Its impact spread into the daily lives of ordinary people and reshaped politics across the continent. In the first 48 hours, markets in Ouagadougou were tense. Rumors of shortages spread quickly. Mothers rushed to buy rice and maize, fearing a repeat of past crises. But when government officials displayed millions in cash, gold bars, and seized weapons on national television, something shifted. The people realized this was not a government on its knees. It was a government standing taller than ever. Ordinary citizens began to speak with pride. A taxi driver told reporters, "For once, we caught them before they caught us. This is the Burkina Faso I want my children to grow up in." Then came what many called the African Nuremberg. Hundreds of accused conspirators were tried in public. Courtrooms were filled, proceedings broadcast live across the continent. Viewers heard generals confess to bribes, ministers reveal pressure from embassies, and businessmen admit ties to foreign corporations. The transparency shocked the world. In Western capitals, officials accused Traoré's government of show trials. But for Africans watching, it was justice made visible. It was proof that betrayal had a cost. The numbers told their own story. 862 coup participants prosecuted. 67 million in assets seized. 240 weapons removed from circulation. Over 12,000 incriminating documents exposed. The conspiracy changed politics far beyond Burkina Faso. Within weeks, the African Union convened an emergency summit, calling for a continental defense pact and joint intelligence sharing. Discussions about a common African currency, once seen as a distant dream, suddenly took center stage. Leaders from Mali, Niger, and Guinea vowed that any attack on one member of the new alliance of Sahel states would be considered an attack on all. Across the continent, politicians who had once spoken cautiously about foreign interference now spoke with fire. A Ghanaian MP declared, "If Burkina Faso can expose the West, then so can we. No more shadows, no more silence." Among the youth, the coup's failure became a rallying cry. In universities from Dakar to Johannesburg, students held debates on neocolonialism and economic independence. Social media buzzed with slogans like, "Africa is rising," and "Our resources, our future." Religious leaders joined the movement. A pastor in Accra preached, "Even in the Bible, Betrayal brought 30 pieces of silver. Today, it brings millions from Swiss accounts. But like Judas, the betrayers will fall. Muslim clerics in Burkina Faso framed the victory as a divine sign. God does not bless those who sell their people. For ordinary families, the coup's failure meant more than headlines. It meant security. Soldiers loyal to the government patrolled the streets, not to intimidate, but to reassure. Civil servants returned to work with renewed energy. Schools reopened quickly. Farmers felt confident enough to plant for the next season. But there was also a sobering realization. If foreign powers were willing to spend $300 million to destroy one small nation, what would they try next? As night fell on a continent still buzzing with debate, one question haunted both leaders and ordinary people. If Africa can resist once, can it resist again? And how will the world's superpowers respond to this defiance? Stay with us, because the next chapter would reveal how Washington, Paris, and London confronted their most humiliating failure in Africa in decades. In Washington, the mood was grim. Reports confirmed that millions of US dollars, channeled through so-called democracy promotion programs, had been traced directly to the coup conspiracy. Senior officials denied involvement. Press briefings used careful language. We support democratic transitions and human rights. But behind closed doors, National Security Council staff spoke of one of the most humiliating setbacks in Africa since the Cold War. The Pentagon ordered a partial withdrawal of AFRICOM forces from West Africa. Officially, it was strategic redeployment. In reality, it was retreat. American influence, once taken for granted, was slipping. In Paris, the blow was even deeper. Leaked documents revealed that President Emmanuel Macron had personally approved covert funds for the plot. When this became public, protests erupted in African capitals. French diplomats were expelled from 8 countries. Mining contracts once worth billions collapsed overnight. French commentators warned of a total collapse of Françafrique. London fared no better. Britain's intelligence agency MI6 was exposed as channeling over £34 million through development funds. African Commonwealth members voiced outrage. In Accra, protesters marched outside the British High Commission shouting, "We are not colonies, not anymore." In the West, mainstream media framed Traoré as a dictator propped up by Moscow and Beijing. Newspapers compared him to past strongmen, but the narrative fell flat outside Western capitals. In Africa, Asia, and Latin America, headlines told a different story. Burkina Faso exposes Western plot. Social media influencers across the global south hailed the failed coup as proof that neocolonialism could be defeated. Russia and China seized the moment. Moscow announced expanded military cooperation with 12 African nations, offering training, weapons, and even nuclear technology. Beijing accelerated Belt and Road projects, pledging $150 billion in African infrastructure and technology investment. Both presented themselves not as new masters, but as allies respecting sovereignty. For Washington, Paris, and London, the question was no longer how to remove Ibrahim Traoré. It was how to stop the wave of defiance he had unleashed across an entire continent. Stay with us, because what came next would decide whether September 3, 2025 was just a victory for Burkina Faso, or the beginning of Africa's second independence. September 3, 2025 will be remembered as the night Africa said no to neo-colonialism. Not with speeches, not with protests alone, but with action that exposed, defeated, and prosecuted the foreign powers determined to keep Africa in chains. But this victory carries a warning. If Western governments, banks, and corporations were willing to spend $300 million on a single coup in a single country, what might they attempt tomorrow? Will they target other leaders who dare to nationalize resources, reject foreign bases, or seek continental unity? Burkina Faso has shown that resistance is possible. Intelligence networks can be exposed. Traitors can be prosecuted. Alternative alliances can be built, but the struggle is far from over. The same forces that plotted Operation Golden Reset are already planning new strategies, new faces, and new traps. And so, the question for Africa, and for the world, is this: was Captain Ibrahim Traoré the beginning of a renaissance, or just the first target in a much larger war? For the elders who lived through colonial rule, this moment feels familiar. For the youth, it is a test of whether independence means anything more than a flag and an anthem. For families across the continent, it is a reminder that freedom is never free. The trials in Ouagadougou were not just about punishing traitors. They were about showing the world that Africa can write its own story, on its own terms. Brothers and sisters, this victory belongs to all who refuse to bow to injustice, to every African who believes our destiny cannot be bought, to every family that prays for dignity, security, and truth. If you believe Africa's future must be written by Africans, share this story with your loved ones. Speak about it at your dinner table, in your churches, in your mosques, in your schools. Let history remember that in this generation, Africa stood up. The coup failed. The evidence is undeniable. The traitors are in prison. Africa is rising. And now, I ask you, is Ibrahim Traoré the hope of a free Africa, or the danger the West fears most? The answer will shape the future of an entire continent.